When I was around the age of 6 or 7, I can't recall correctly, we went to a small pet shop frequently because my mom fed the strays around. The guy that owned the store was accompanied by a neighborhood that kept him company, as he was alone and it was a small store in a neighborhood. Now that guy gave me the chills. There was something in his smile, in his crooked teeth, that made me not wanting to be near him. He would try to chat with me innocently, but I was very shy, so I wouldn't answer, and went around looking at the fish tanks and the pet bunnies. But, as expected, he would show up and make comments about them. Now, my mom didn't get any bad vibes from him, as he would also chat with her about the animals she takes care of, and etc. One day, we visit the store. The owner approaches my mom and talks to her privately. Apparently, he apologized to her for letting that man be near me, as he was arrested for sexually harassing a slightly older girl in the neighborhood. The guy was a pedophile and was found out he was trying to groom lots of kids in the neighborhood, especially sometimes when they entered the store, then the pedo was by himself in the store. I still can't believe that my 6-year-old gut sense was right. I once went to drop off my friends to go tubing at a river nearby. I couldn't stay, but I could be a designated driver. Where we go tubing around here is through mountains and there's no cell service. I walked them over to their spot to say hi to a few of our other friends and then started to walk back to my car. The walk was about 10 minutes and over a hill bit. About 6 minutes into my walk, a guy is approaching behind me. I am aware of him but don't think much of it. He then proceeds to ask me if I was going tubing. I let him know I'm just heading back to my car and keep it short and sweet. He's wearing jeans, a long sleeve shirt, and a baseball cap. And this starts to strike me as odd, as it is 100 degrees and it feels hotter in direct sunlight like we are. He then asked me if I would be willing to take him to get some bait for fishing. He said his buddy ran out and his buddy was the one driving, so he didn't have a way to get back to town to get it. I immediately say I'm sorry, but I can't, and pick up my pace. So does he, insisting that he needs a ride. My hairs are standing up on the back of my neck at this point, and all my fight or flight responses are kicking in. I make the decision that the car is closer than my friends and keep going. He would not relent, saying I don't need to be a bitch, he can get me a beer and etc. My car is in view and I spot another car, and I'm just hoping someone gets out. Someone to see me that I can scream to, or just someone that makes him think twice about whatever he's thinking about. To my dismay, no one does, and no one is at the nearby picnic tables. As I approached my car, he grabbed my arm, and almost as if on cue, a family pulls off to the side of the road, and this causes him to let go, and I quickly get into my car. I am shaking, and I know I need to get out of there. The family is getting their kids out of the car to have a picnic, and he's just kind of hanging out nearby. I pull out and start to drive and check my rearview mirror, and I see him get into his car, the other one that was in the parking lot. I watch to make sure he doesn't follow me. Thankfully, he doesn't. This still gives me the chills to this day. I know it in my bones, that if he had gotten into my car, I would have been assaulted or killed. Always lock your car doors and hit that like button. In early 1994, I was working an evening shift alone in a convenience store. Paul Hill came into the store. Hill was one of the clinic protesters in town. He kept to himself, carrying big apocalyptic signs and walking back and forth. I volunteered at the clinics to keep those people from harassing patients and staff, so I didn't really see a difference between him and the rest. But I'd heard chatter that the other protesters were afraid of him. Understandable. Here he is in my store, at the counter, quietly pleasant as he pays for his items. And all the while I'm freezing. I've rarely had someone scare me, but this fucker set off all those little inner alarms. He had that preacher look, the haircut, the boyish face, but over 6 feet tall, about a head taller than me. It was a relief when he left, like I could breathe again. I don't know if he was actually just a customer, or if he was scoping me out. I'd had some of them roll past my house, had my car vandalized, but those didn't scare me, and I doubt he had anything to do with it. Several months passed. On July 29, 1994, Paul Hill ambushed and murdered my friend Jean Barrett and Dr. John Britton in the driveway of one of those clinics. He blasted each of them with a shotgun. I went on a float trip with a bunch of friends. Some had kids they brought along. Fun group. But 2 of the girls, 10 and 14, were adopted, and their adopted mom, Jane, and them did not get along. Jane was a real bitch too. Super controlling and a terrible micromanager. I thought the girls were wonderful. I was like the Funko they didn't have. We all got into our canoes. The girls had their own. And Jane started bitching at them for doing it wrong. I paddled up to the adoptive dad, Joe, and told him they should enjoy their float and to go ahead, and I'll hang with the girls and teach them how to canoe. They took off like a shot. The girls and I had an enjoyable time. They finally learned how to work together to get the canoe going and steer and all the things they needed to know. They were at total peace, because the hag Jane was not even in earshot. Anywho, the girls and I were paddling along when we started to float by a gravel bar with some drunk as fuck guys hanging out in the chest deep water, trying to score with all the hot little mamas that floated by. Again, my girls were an early bloomer 10 and 14. 2 guys saw them coming, 2 little girls in a canoe, and someone on shore tossed an extra beer cans. They started heading towards us and our splashing the girls were telling them to stop, trying to give them beers. I was about 45 feet back when he started, and I was there pretty quick. One of the guys told me to chill the fuck out, after I said to back off because, according to him, those girls are old enough to make their own decision. The other guy was trying to grab on the side of their boat, and my girls were scared as fuck. Now, I'm not a small guy. I am a solid 5'8" and was every bit of 250. I stand up in the canoe, draw my paddle back like a baseball bat, and tell him he's 2 seconds from having his head split open and left to die in a piss-filled river. I'd have been no challenge to these guys on land, but I wasn't surrounded by water, and they were. Took a check swing at the guy who grabbed their boat, and he about shit himself. I went on to the girls, who asked around the next bend if we could stop for a minute. They were crying, and I was amped up. I got them calmed down, and we got back in the water. Jane and Joe got the absolute basic of what happened back at camp. I was afraid she'd blame the girls for being harassed. And the next day, they let the girls ride home with me. We sang songs and card danced, and they thanked me for being good to them. 15 years later, we still keep in touch occasionally. They're great kids, and I'm glad I was the one to spend time with them and handle their aggressors that day.